2 competitions, and a bar exam. All right. Another really important issue to address right away in this course is improvement expectations. That's really what matters most of all. How can you expect to improve, and how can we measure your improvement on the GRE? So, how do we measure improvement in the first place? The easiest way to do it is to just subtract points. If your GRE math score started at 138 and it ended at 144, then you gained 6 points. So that would be the simplest way to measure GRE improvement, by straight points, 6 points or whatever. Now that's not particularly useful information, because gaining 6 points in the 130s is very easy. Whereas gaining 6 points if you're in the 160s is ridiculously hard. So 6 points here and 6 points there are just not comparable to each other. And gaining percentile points is not really linear either. So the way that I monitor and measure improvement is with a metric that I made up. It's called the improvement score. And the improvement score basically measures how scarce you are and how much more scarce you become after you finish your test prep. And what do I mean by scarce? For example, a hardworking student in this course can become twice as scarce as at the beginning of the course. For example, she could improve from the top 40% to the top 20%. So that's a measurement of how scarce you are. If you are in the top 40% and then you improve to the top 20%, you've joined a club that's half as large as the one that you used to belong to. Twice as exclusive, twice as scarce. So the way that I can measure this improvement score is using this formula. And don't worry, you don't need to use the formula, but you might be curious about how this formula works. So P1 and P2 are your percentiles at the beginning and end of this course. P1 is your beginning percentile, and P2 is your ending percentile. So you might need to review that concept of percentile a little bit. But for example, if you are at let's say the 70th percentile, that means that you have outscored 70% of the competition. So let's see a little bit of an example of how this works. This is Stephanie, my stereotypical student, and she's standing on the curve of GRE scores with, remember, 150 in the middle. And you can see that there are going to be a number of students to our left of her over here. These are the scores that are lower than hers. But there are also some scores, unfortunately, to her right, our right, as we look at this picture, who are the students that are outperforming her. And on this diagram, I've used every face to represent 5% of the population. So let's suppose that Stephanie starts here at the beginning of her course, and she takes her entrance test. And at that time, there are 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40% of the students are doing better than her. That means that she's at the 60th percentile. And that's why there's a 60 here. And then she takes my class. She takes the GRE course she wants. She improves, and now she's standing here on the pile. You can see that she's surpassed half of her competitors. Right? Now 4 of the faces are behind her, and 4 remain ahead of her. So she now stands at the 80th percentile because there are still 5, 10, 15, 20% of the competition ahead of her. 80th percentile goes here. And when you plug those numbers in and do the arithmetic, you'll find that she has an improvement score of 2. She has become twice as scarce because she's gone from the top 40% to the top 20%. Another way of saying the same thing is that she's cut her competition in half. She's pulled ahead of half of the students who were originally ahead of her. So that's how I measure the improvement score. Again, that's not so much of a concern for you. You don't necessarily need to measure that, but I just want to kind of present this as the reasonable way to measure improvement. So if you look at a course like Kaplan or Manhattan or Magoosh, you shouldn't really be asking them how many points their students improve. You should try to get a sense of this improvement score metric, which unfortunately I made up and other test prep services don't use. But this is really the accurate score. Okay, now can you obtain an improvement score of 2? Is that good or bad or average? Well, I would say that from what I see of my students, an improvement score of 2 is good. It's pretty solid. It's hard, but it's reasonable. It's challenging but reasonable. For a student who works hard for a few months, I think that you could reasonably expect an improvement score of about 2. Now, how does that translate into GRE scores, raw scores? Because that's what we really want to know. Okay, so for that relation, I've created this chart of colored improvement bands. The scores on the lower half of this chart are in red, and this literally represents the lower half of the curve. So for example, if you were at the 25th percentile, you'd be scoring 145 verbal, 147 math, or 292 as your composite score. So the red scores fall in the lower half of the curve, the orange scores fall in the upper half, and then the scarcity keeps doubling. So the yellow scores represent the upper quarter, the green scores are in the upper eighth, and remember that's basically where selective schools like to pick their students from, and the blue scores are in the upper 1/16th. Now for an average but hard-working student who works for a couple of months, Stephanie, she can probably expect an improvement score of about 2. And what that would translate to on this chart would be pulling her up by exactly 1 colored improvement band. So my typical student will begin in the red lower half and will end my program in the orange upper half. That would be pretty typical and reasonable if you're willing to work hard for a couple months. I definitely see that students get out of this course what they put into it. So do I have some students who start in the red and stay in the red? Oh yes, I do. Especially, I have to say, students with full-time jobs, because that makes it very hard to really focus on the GRE. But maybe now that this course is online, it might be a little bit more flexible and will give you more time to work on it as you need. And of course, we all want to know the answer to the opposite question. Do some students start in the red zone and end up in the yellow and green zones? And my answer to that is, unfortunately, not very often. I suppose I've seen it a few times. It's possible, but it's exceptional. So I think it's healthy as you begin this course to have a reasonable sense of what you can expect. It's not reasonable to expect that you're going to go from a 142 to a 162. As you can see, scoring in the lower 160s puts you in the upper at the 90th percentile already. If you can do that, you would be in the top 10%. And by definition, 90% of students don't ever get there. And those who do usually started in the top 75 or 80, in the 75th, 80th, 85th percentile. So how are you going to use this course? As I mentioned in my book, this course is a revision of what used to be a group class that I held right here in my office in Los Angeles. It was structured very strictly as a 6-week course, 3 hours every weekend. But now it's been reformatted for individual study online. So you're basically going to go through this course at your own pace, and there are a few components to it. So first, you're going to turn to a lesson in your nth degree course book, the nth degree course you want book. Right now, of course, you're in lesson 1 of that book. You're going to follow the URL or QR code to view the video lectures. So I've made this course smartphone friendly. If you prefer to study on your smartphone, you can just scan a QR code in my book, and it will take you to the video lecture. To be honest, I really recommend that you use a screen larger than a phone, at least like an iPad. I'm a laptop person myself, and I think that when you use a larger screen, it's going to be easier for you to follow the lectures, especially the written material. But that's up to you. I know that a lot of younger people really basically do everything on their smartphone. So you're going to be following the video lectures, and then you'll also have your print book. And you'll notice that the book will largely follow along with the video. Afterward, when you go back to your course book, you're going to find homework at the end of the lesson. And you'll do your homework, and I'm sure that you'll do great on most of it. Some of the homework, by the way, will be in my course book, and some homework will be in the ETS guide. So you're going to need to have that ETS guide before you get to lesson 2. But after you do your homework, I want you to check your answers and learn from your mistakes. And then if there are some problems that just aren't working for you, then you have the option of going to my website, nth-degreetutoring.com, and going to my appointment calendar and booking a lesson. And you can meet me right here in my office if you're local to Los Angeles, or if you're online, obviously we can Zoom or Skype from anywhere in the world. So I would recommend that you schedule lessons with me either for homework questions and answers or for essay feedback. After you write your essay, you're going to want to have some human feedback on that. You can actually submit your essays to the ETS, and they have a grading algorithm. But just so you know, that grading is done by a computer. And I believe you do have the option of paying extra to have an ETS grader grade your exams, your essays as well. But of course, that's a service that I offer too. Okay, so at this point, you're going to go back into your course book at the end of lesson 1, and you're going to find a little bit of homework there that has to do with basically preparation and a little bit of extra reading. But the most important thing for you to do this week is to order your ETS book. You'll have to have that for the rest of this course. Okay, so I think we're off to a good start. Thanks again for being here, and I'll talk to you soon.